All right. Welcome, everybody, to the 24th episode of the Sales Call Overhaul Facebook live show and podcast. We're very excited about launching the podcast very soon here with a backlog of great interviews here. Today, our guest is Tim McDonald, and my name is Jeremy Pope, and my co-founder is with me today, weirdly enough.
Wow.
Wow.
Often found together. Yes, I am
Wow.
Jason Hannigan.
Yeah, when you find a Jeremy, you can often find a Jason. Yes. So thanks for being here with us today, guys. I'm going to explain a little bit about the giveaway that we do with the Sales Call Overhaul, and then we will jump right in. I'll get Jason to kick us off. The Sales Call Overhaul giveaway is an $1,100 package that we give away. So you can submit your own sales calls to be overhauled by us. We choose a winner every week where we're doing it. We choose a winner, and we will transcribe, timestamp, give detailed notes on your sales call, grade it in 9 different areas, show you the 3 key areas of fastest, highest leverage for boosting your close rate 10% in 3 calls or less. And you can see past calls in the Facebook group, even with sound bites. You can hear the sound bites in the Facebook group. So if you're interested in doing that, then message our page at facebook.com/salescalloverhaul, and we would love to overhaul your sales call. So send them in, folks. Next week, our guest is Christopher Goudreau, who is a funnel architect. He builds high-ticket sales funnels, and he's worked with lead pages for quite some time. So he really, really knows his stuff and how to do this high-ticket sales stuff from the funnel end of things. Let us know who you want to hear as a guest. We want to know your opinion, and we want to know who's relevant. And Tim, we'll even ask you that after we're done with the show, who else we should interview. So we definitely want to hear from you. And today's topic is growing communities to develop those high-ticket prospects you need through engagement. Jason, will you take us away?
Well, I first met Tim. We were guests on a personal branding webinar. And I heard his story and instantly connected with him and thought, wow, this would be really cool to bring to our audience, because I haven't run into anybody who has actually done what you've done, Tim. And there are a lot of people who have founded groups and things like that, but they're more recent and they're very Facebook focused, right? And I believe that platforms don't really matter, technology doesn't really matter, those things can change, but the principles don't change. And I think you've got a great handle on that. So what does Tim do here? Tim McDonald guides individuals and organizations on their journey to becoming what he calls 21st century leaders, which is great because teaching people to become Samuel Gompers or Joseph Stalin probably doesn't really make a lot of sense at this point. What he helps them do is help them understand and internalize their role as community builders to deliver their product and service through trusted relationships. He's a big relationships guy. And he's about igniting movements with a customer focus. So he's gotten to work with some organizations like No Kid Hungry, Cinnabon. Do we have you to blame for the Cinnabon, Tim?
Yes. Well,
yes.
No, you don't have me to blame for it, but yes, by probably making you aware of it or getting you to try it, yeah, I was probably involved in a little bit of that. And the people I work with.
I owe you 20% of my future diabetes.
Your fat content.
Yeah.
This is your fault, Tim. So he gets into things like marketing, vision, strategy, execution of social media campaigns, blogger programs, influencer relationships, and that. He raised a lot of money for some great charities, fed a lot of hungry kids with those charity dollars. And prior to that, this is the story that really bit into me, was that Tim was the director of community for the Hufflington Post, where he set strategy and oversaw a team of moderators and set standards in that with like 300 million comments and 70,000 bloggers. So like that's mind-boggling if you think about all that content chatter, right? And trying to corral everybody.
That's not people in a Facebook group. That's actual writers. Wow.
Right, right. They do this. Yeah, exactly. So he built and managed this community for Huffington Post and their live streaming network. It was called HuffPost Live. It resulted in this number here, 9,600 guests from more than 85 countries have joined live on air, and over 1.3 million comments on the platform. So Tim knows a hell of a lot about getting people involved and getting the most out of them, getting that purpose-driven life kind of thing going on. And so he's all about instigating engagement and conversation. So I want to get right into it. Tim, there was no such thing as community manager. It wasn't a standard role. In fact, HuffPost kind of asked you to come and do this thing, right? How did you identify the opportunity? I mean, the field was brand new. Let's take everybody back to, I mean, what year was it?
Yeah, well, it was, I think about 9 years ago now, or 9 years ago, I started getting involved. Well, it was 10 years ago, I know, that I got involved with social media. I was doing real estate in Chicago, and I was working for a developer. The market was crashing, and I was just like, how am I going to find clients for myself instead of relying on the developer I was working for? And I go, oh, light bulb. I can get on Facebook, and it's easy to reconnect with everybody that I went to high school with, right? Sounds simple. Good equation. What I forgot to realize was that everybody and their brother, if I were to ask anyone here, how many real estate agents are you related to? You could probably raise your hand and say more than one, right? Whether it's an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, right. Your college, roommate, any one of those people. And so just the fact that I went to high school with these people didn't do anything. So Facebook wasn't like the great thing for me. But what happened was Twitter came around, and Twitter now allowed me to connect with everybody that I didn't know. And it allowed me to listen in on conversations instead of just connecting with people I already knew. And so what I became really known as was this person who knew how to find people, how to connect with them, how to build a relationship with other people that knew people that were looking for homes that would then refer me as a real estate agent. And it really was a great thing. And I loved doing it. I just hated doing real estate. I hated the hard sale that you needed to be successful. I like building the relationships and finding people and developing that. And that's not what the real estate, I mean, it is long term, right? But if you want to be successful short term, it doesn't help you get started too well. So I started getting involved in learning everything I could about social media and how we could build these communities. And it's funny that you mentioned that, Jason, because I actually Googled community manager when I first heard the word, and I found an enterprise community site that's still around today. It's called Community Roundtable. They were at the time were mainly focused on people that were doing internal communities for large organizations. How do you communicate with your employees effectively, right? I found another group of community managers that was an online forum that was the gaming community managers, who they did not think that community managers were anything new. They had been around for, it was 15 years at that time, so probably 25 years now. And they were the ones that were, running all these gaming communities that is even grown even more. I could not be accepted into that community because I was not a gaming community guy. And so they were very protective, and that's how they valued their community. And that was a big lesson I learned from them about being exclusive, right? Like, you just can't let everybody in, otherwise it's not a community. And then I found this other one that was geared around startups, and they've kind of evolved into what's now known as CMX Hub. And they deal with all different types of communities. But I was not any one of those things. I was kind of doing this for Social Media Club Chicago and realized there was an opportunity here, right? If I was searching for a community manager, other people were going to be searching for a community manager. And so I started a site called My Community Manager. And what we did was everybody on Twitter was doing Twitter chats at that time, and Google Plus had come out with Google Hangouts. And I'm like, I do not want to be another person holding a Twitter chat like everybody else. I want to kind of differentiate myself. And so I started doing these Google Hangouts on Google Plus, and we called them Community Manager Hangouts. And we do them every Friday. So like, we're sitting here talking at 2:00 on Friday, which is when you guys always record your shows. This was the exact time that I hosted Community Manager Hangout every Friday at 2 p.m. We did that for over 4 years straight, not missing a single Friday, even if it was a Christmas or a New Year's Day. We always held those. The audience was a lot smaller, but that's the commitment that we had to doing them every week. And as a result of that growing and me making new relationships with the people because of those Hangouts and because of what we were doing on My Community Manager, it started connecting me with other people that were doing community management.
Mm.
And so I always said it was a community for community managers by community managers, because what we did was none of us came in as the expert. We all came in with what we knew and what we wanted to learn, and we shared with each other. And that was really what it was about. It was about this give and take thing. It wasn't a transactional thing. It was very organic. And one of the people that I got to know used to be the former director of community at Huffington Post, and saw another Facebook post, nothing to do with community management, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, right? It's the Venn diagram that says what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what pays well.
What people will pay for.
Yep. And this one was yellow circles, and the center was red, where they all overlapped. And I shared that post saying, I'm getting closer to red every day. So Justin, who was working at HuffPost at the time, said, come work at HuffPost. We'll help get you there. And I called him on the phone he called me on the phone, because I know how employee referrals work, and I don't play those games. If you're serious about it, you do a little bit of work to get me there. Don't make me do all the work and just put my application in. So I had talked with him, and he brought up this thing called, it was what became HuffPost Live, but it was a live streaming network that they were getting ready to launch, and they needed a community manager to help their production staff get guests and help run the comments and get more people commenting on that platform, because it was supposed to be a live conversation like we're doing right here, but it was also supposed to be comments associated with this in real time that the host could actually bring in and make part of the conversation. And so they were looking for somebody to run this community and build it up from nothing. And I just got so excited about it that I interviewed with them. My interview was actually, and this is like earth shattering, right? Like a lot of companies do this today, but back in the time, the executives actually interviewed me via video for that job. I never went to New York for an interview. I was always in Chicago interviewing via a live stream for the position. And I ended up getting offered that position and moving to New York. I think it's about 6 years ago. This May, it'll be 6 years that I moved out to New York, and was there for about a year, really helped it progress. And Justin had left right after, or shortly after I had gotten there, and the director of community position remained open. And so it was just one of those things where they were like, Tim, you keep referring people for this position. Why haven't you applied for it yourself? And I said, well, I don't want it. I like doing what I'm doing. I love the HuffPost Live. I love the startup feel. I love, really getting involved with the people. And he said, well, what can we do? And I won't go into all those details, but it basically, they offered me the job. It was on the terms that I agreed with. And so I took over this whole team of moderators and everything else. So really the beginning of this was all stemmed from me just realizing in a non-social media environment that I needed to use these new tools in order to connect with new prospects and new clients to be able to get business, which turned into me understanding how to really do that well. That got an organization the size of HuffPost to say, come do this for us.
Yeah, we need to talk with you about our own plans for the Facebook group and our podcasting group. That's really cool. When you're talking about the everybody, the Google Hangouts and the community you had around that, and everybody brought what they wanted to, or what they had and what they wanted to learn. What kind of differences do you see between that approach and the approach that is common and that we're kind of using as well for our own Facebook group, where one company owns the Facebook group and it's kind of about a certain topic? Are there certain dynamics to be aware of in that, or can you use the same kind of everybody take a penny, give a penny kind of approach?
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting because when we started, it wasn't like there wasn't a business plan associated with it, right? It was more me just going, I'm interested in this, right? I want to learn about this. So how can I learn about it from other people that know more than I do? Like invite them to come share, and I'll share what I know, what I've learned from other people. And that's kind of like how it started. So I think trying to compare it isn't good. But what I did learn about it was when we first started, if you remember, Google Hangouts weren't broadcast out to the public. You had to be in, I'm dating myself here, but you had to be in the Google circle of the profile or the page in order to participate in a Google Hangout. And so what I did was I said my strategy was, well, I'm going to host these Google Hangouts. You have to circle us or plus one us. I forget the actual term that we used at the time. But you had to be part of our circle on Google Plus in order to watch and to actually ask to participate in the Hangout. And so instead of asking people like for an email signature or to like us on Facebook or to follow us on Twitter, that was our approach there.
Yeah.
It was always the premise, what happened in Community Manager Hangout stayed on Community Manager Hangout because there was no recording option. And so it was very much a free-for-all where we didn't have a topic that we talked about. We just came in and started, what do you want to talk about? And then I realized that people, even though they're raising their hand and say they want to come talk, they just want to be on camera, or they just want to be part of it, right? It's not that they are coming with something to share or that they want to ask. They just want to be part of what you have going on. And so what I really started learning was I needed to come up with a focus for each week in order to get more people aware of what we were doing. Imagine think of any event that you have thought about going to or that you go to. If I just said, I'm hosting the best event ever on sales and didn't tell you who was going to be there or what topics we were going to be discussing, would you pay me $1,000 to show up?
No. I mean, not without knowing what the audience was, but that counts.
Right.
It's going to be there.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the premise that I started learning from all this was if I want people to show up and more people to start participating, I need to give them something concrete that they know an expectation at least of what they're going to get out of it when they show up. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I learned was going from that environment of, hey, this is just for all of us and everybody can do everything, to saying, okay, it's still a community platform, right? But I'm steering the ship. I'm gonna pick the topics. I'm gonna invite the guest. I'm gonna set up the questions. I'm gonna develop the topic and help promote this and hopefully get everybody else to want to promote it so that people know what to expect when they show up here. And so that was a major difference that I changed right away. And even though it constantly remained like a community for community managers by community managers, it still took a leader, right? It still took me. Yep. It still took the people that I put on the team that I eventually turned the site over to after I left when I was at HuffPost. So it really is one of these things that you need to understand that you need to be able to listen to what people are giving you in response, what they're saying back, the feedback that you're getting. And if people stop showing up, then you need to change something. There's not something wrong with the people. There's something wrong with the message that you're giving the people. Yeah. And so that's what I learned was, how do I pivot that, right? How do I change that enough to get people to want to show up?
By the way, can you stay for 3 hours today?
I probably can, and then I need to jump in the shower and go to dinner. But yes,
we'll keep it within our time frame. But my goodness, okay, this is awesome.
Yeah. So Tim, I want to get a picture in people's minds, including my own. So I'm going to ask a question about roles. What's the difference between a community manager and a moderator?
Yeah, well, I think they can both be the same, right? Like a moderator can be a community manager, but not all community managers are moderators. And I think that's important to understand because a moderator's main role is to, moderate the conversation that's happening. I have seen some of the best community managers not participate, not put any guidance on directly into the community. They kind of set up the ground rules. They make it clear. They put the right people in the community to start with, and they don't have to do any moderation after that. They let the community organically go. I'm part of one. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Skim. I'm not talking to any 20, 30-year-old females here, so I'm guessing you guys might not be aware of the Skim, but the Skim is a weekly newsletter that skims the news for young professionals, and it's mostly women. And I became aware of them because they have this thriving community. And they started a Facebook group for what they call their Skimbassadors. And you have to become a Skimbassador in order to be part of this Facebook group. The Facebook group has nothing to do with the Skim whatsoever. It's a bunch of people asking questions, looking for advice, sharing life lessons. And you got to remember, these are a lot of people that are, getting married for their first time, graduating college, looking for their first job, having their first child, all these types of situations. And so I'm not an active participant in there, but I can tell you that almost, the only moderation that goes on in that group is if somebody starts insulting somebody else or using profanity in a way that is insulting to somebody else.
Right.
Otherwise, it is purely 100% the community engaging with each other. The only essence of the Skim in there is they've started recently a weekly AMA with a guest, and they do it via Facebook Live in the Skimbassador group. And that's the only thing that you see them really posting in there about the Skim. So hopefully that answered your question about how, like, the differences between moderating, in my opinion, is strictly kind of, really deciding what's right and wrong in a comment or in an engagement strategy. And I mean, that's not strictly it, but when it comes down to it, it's like, does this belong? Does this not belong? And that's your decision, whether it's somebody else's comment or what you're going to put in there to help spur engagement. That's like the moderator. Community builder is really much more a higher level than that, where they're looking at the overall strategy. What are the business goals that we're hoping to achieve? How are we going to deliver that through the people that we bring into the community? How are we going to get people to enter the community, and what actions do we want them to take once they're here? That, to me, is more of the community manager role, where you're really looking at the overall business objectives for this community, much more than just a certain task within the community.
That does make sense. Okay.
So as a community manager, one of the things that we've seen like with a lot of coaching programs and that is, if you don't help new members or guide new members a certain way, they'll drop off. They'll feel isolated and leave, right? And if it's a paid program, that's really bad. Is there something that you found that's useful to do with new members to drive engagement and retention?
Yeah, well, I think, the best thing to do, right, is welcome them. And how many people don't do that, right? And I'm not saying you're canned, welcome to the, to XYZ group, or community, or whatever your terminology is that you're using, but make it personal, right? Let them know that you checked out their profile, that their actual name and where they live, if they make that available to you. Even if their profile is pretty knocked down, you can probably look, like if we're talking about on Facebook, you can probably look at their pictures, right? And see maybe some of the places they've been and say, oh my gosh, that looks like, Aruba. Were you just down there? I was there last month. Something as little as that, just to let them know that you took an interest in them. I think that's the biggest thing that most people aren't doing when they welcome people in. I think the other biggest thing is, what can you do to introduce them to somebody else in the community that's an active community member who's been there a little bit longer? So now it's not you as the community manager who works for the organization telling them what they should be doing. It's one of their peers in the community helping them understand what they might want to do in the community. And that takes, I always say, as a community manager, my job is to get other people to do my work for me. And so, which is a job in itself. People always laugh, well, then you're not going to have a job. No, I'm like, that is a job to get that to happen. But once you start doing that, now what you're doing is more connecting people within the community instead of always answering the community, or instead of always kind of spurring that engagement on. So really, a lot of the engagement happened for me because I built relationships with some key community members who I knew were the most engaged, always willing to help other people. And if they came in and talked about something or said something or asked a question, those community members would be the ones answering it or telling them who they could talk to go find that out. It was never, oh, go talk to Tim. It was always, who in the community, or where can I find this? And other community members were helping other community members. And to me, I think that's the best engagement strategy you can go. When you're starting out, that probably will have to be you. You can't just hand pick, you know, your best 10 or your best 20 community members when you have a community of 2, right? So you need to grow that and understand that those people are rare finds. And when you find them, you need to treat them like gold and let them know that they matter. That doesn't mean you need to start paying them, but you need to find out what's important to them, what they care about, and why they're passionate about the community they're in. And once you can find that out and make sure that you're fulfilling that for them, they will do almost anything that you want them to do.
Wow.
Gotcha.
This really goes into my next question, which is, about what are their strategies and tactics for building a great group of people. Can you share maybe that you learned from HuffPost? And we just got into one, which is pay attention to them and develop them.
But still, that's after they've asked to join.
Right.
I think a lot of people in our audience are going to be really interested in, how do I get people interested in the first place? What do I do to get them aware of the community?
That's even a better question.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I mean, I like all this kind of ties in together, so I love it. But let me just take into the why do people want to belong, right? And as business people, we all know what's in it for us, right? We all understand why we're doing it.
Yeah.
What we don't often enough do is put ourselves in the minds of the people that we're trying to get into our community.
Well, this is a classic sales thing, isn't it?
What's in it for them?
Right.
When we start thinking what's in it for them, we can understand and start to identify some of the trigger points that will want to get them to be part of this community. And I said this earlier. I have listened to many other people that have come to me with this situation that they're in. I work with this group and we do amazing work, and I'm trying to figure out how to get people aware of this. And I'm like, well, how do you know that you do amazing work? Oh, well, our clients tell us this. I'm like, well, instead of maybe you always talking about how great of work you do, maybe get your clients to start sharing what great work you do and the impact that it had on them. And then when they start sharing that, their friends are looking at it as a more trusted source than from a business.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like the best way to kind of get people interested in your community is find those trigger points. But then once you start having clients and they're saying how great you are, let their words be the ones that are bringing people in. Don't always make it your words that are bringing people in.
Yeah, that makes sense. You hear that, Stephen? We're not going to be paying you for ambassadorial efforts, but we sure do appreciate it. I know who some of our ambassadors are already. There's definitely a few who are
Justin. Hey.
Yeah.
So
Jim and Joe and Stephen. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question now. Do they understand that they are? Have you let them know that they are and the value that they are to you?
Well, we probably have not told. Yeah. We have not appreciated them properly. They know exactly what they're doing. I mean, they're all savvy, but they are probably feeling underappreciated. Yeah, so that's important for us.
Well, see, and I love this because what you just identified, right? And if any business owner can sit down right now, the biggest thing that the initial response is, well, where do I find these people? I don't have them. Well, you just in 30 seconds,
that's almost never true, though.
Name like 10, right? That you guys have. And so now the real question, and the reason why people immediately do that is because they don't want to admit fault in themselves, right? They don't want to admit that they weren't doing something that was so obvious. And so
we're quite willing to say how dumb we are.
No, I'm very okay with admitting my clownhood. Yeah.
Well, that is so refreshing and open. I love it. That's why I'm like having a good time with you, because we get along in that way. If you were to sit there and go, "Oh, I don't know of anybody," I'd call bullshit. I'd say, "Well, no, tell me who." One person, just give me one person's name that you've done business with that thinks that you're doing an amazing job for them, and what are they willing to do? And then usually the next question is, well, why aren't you taking advantage? Well, they don't really have a big social media following. They don't post that much on Facebook. They don't, they're not that active on Twitter.
What about this one? What about, I would feel bad for taking advantage of them?
Listen,
how about that?
I've never found anybody that felt taken advantage of if I'm giving them something of value that they want.
Yep. That's the thing right there.
And that's why I always tell people this. I mean, and this comes up to another great, and this is part of the strategy, right? The overall strategy that I look in any community. If I make this feel like work to you, you're going to expect a paycheck.
Yeah.
If I can make it fun, and I'm not saying fun needs to be let's all put on our clown suits and dress up goofy and go do improv tonight. It all depends on the people that are in your community.
Right.
But what is enjoyable? What is fun? What allows me to feel like I want to be doing this? I'm not being told to do this. I want to do this.
Right.
And that comes into that whole thing that I kind of skirted a little bit about, you need to give people what they want, but you can't start paying them, because as soon as you start paying them, what they start thinking is every action I take, I want to be compensated for.
It becomes a tit for tat, quid pro quo.
Right. Now they are an employee of yours, whether you call them an employee or not, they become an employee. The great thing about community is you never make it monetary. Yeah. It's always about what's in here, right? What am I feeling? Why does this matter to me? What is the purpose of me being here? Because as soon as I don't have a purpose to be here, I don't want to be here. No amount of money is going to get me to want to be here if I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
So what can I do as a community manager to fulfill that feeling for you, to help you feel that way, not to have you want to leave? And sometimes that might be a little bit of swag. Sometimes that's giving somebody an official title, even if they don't work for you. Sometimes it's just giving them the understanding of, hey, not everybody gets to this level in our community. Not everybody gets to join our community. You are one of an elite few that are, and I'm using language that you might not want to use in your community, but I'm just saying to demonstrate the point of what this truly means to that individual that you're talking to. That's what it should feel like to them. I am part of something that not everybody else can be part of.
Yeah. That's cool. So the awareness building stuff, I think a lot of our folks are gonna say, how do you make people? I mean on a fundamental awareness level, like they've never heard of you before. What do you do to grow from that standpoint? I mean, for instance, we have our little Facebook group, and we're looking at referral contests and semi-viral campaigns and running Facebook ads to it. What kind of things should a group owner or a community builder think about with that?
Yeah, well, I think it's first understand that there's a lot of things you can do that give you a very high spike in a very short window.
Okay.
So like, for instance, if you run a Facebook ad, right, the ad might get people in there at a higher rate than what you're doing organically. But once you stop paying Facebook to run that ad, you stop getting the people coming in.
Sure.
So what I focus on more is like the longer term engagement. The people that I bring in aren't going to be the high numbers that a Facebook ad might bring in, but the people that are coming in are coming in because they want to be there. They've requested to be part of this. They want to be part of this. And and I think most of us all think that there's this magic easy button. I talk about this so often. I need to get one that I can actually keep on my desk and like show you. But the big red easy button. I think that's what everybody is expecting and wants. Mm-hmm. It does not exist. It didn't in an Office product commercial. That was it. The reality of the matter is it takes time and it takes effort and it's going to evolve, and you need to savor the small wins, because when you get that one person out of the 10 that joined your group that day that really latches onto you and can become maybe one of those ambassadors for you or those higher level community members for you, that's like a huge win, right? That's what most businesses would go out and pay $10,000, $20,000 to get somebody to do that for them.
Right.
And so you're getting that and take that as a win. To me, it's all about being authentic to who you are and what your brand is about. And if you're not doing that, people will see right through it. They're gonna know that this was just a sales ploy to get me in here, and now they want to sell me something. And and again, that gets into the whole did we ever realize what was in it for the other person, right? And so any engagement strategy that you do should really be focused not so much on what you're offering, right? But what they can get from it.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's talk about culture for a minute. We're interested in high ticket selling. Our group members, I would hope, are interested in that. They're interested in sales at least. Do you allow everybody in? Do you qualify heavily? And what other things can you do to develop that culture?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's really important is to understand what your goal is, right? Because then you can back into that. But you need to understand the difference between a community and an audience, because an audience is a lot of people that come and go as their need is there, right? And a community is somebody who might never buy an item from you, but could become your biggest fan.
I've never really thought about this difference before.
Neither have I.
Okay.
And so for me, what I'm looking at is I don't want to sell you, and no offense to you guys and what you guys do, but I don't want to sell you a ticket to my event, right?
Yeah.
I want to get you to become a member of my community so that you can help me sell even more tickets for the next 10 years to all the events that I'm going to host.
Yeah.
And you might actually buy a ticket to come to the event, but you might not, but you might get me 1,000 people that come to my events over the next 10 years.
Right.
And so you basically become a salesperson for me without me ever having a contractual agreement with you, without me probably ever paying you a dime. I mean, not in dollars from my pocket to yours, but in other ways. And that's the best person I can have to be doing my work for me. Because if we look at trust in our world today, right? Who do consumers trust the most? They trust their peers.
Yeah.
Or strangers that are other customers, right? Mm-hmm. That's who they trust. Yeah. More than an organization, more than a politician, more than a CEO. So they trust people.
Yeah. With a community, you mentioned goals a minute ago, and that trust there. What are healthy goals for a community? Like, not just metrics, like this many people joining per this amount of size, but like what kind of goals should a community founder set in place aside from, I mean, because I've been guilty of this kind of thing in the past, is that we're gonna set up a thing and we're gonna sell, and you quickly realize this is not exactly what we want. But then there's, what do we replace it with? What are healthy goals? How do you set healthy goals for a community?
Yeah, well, I think, it gets into, what those goals are, right? So let's just take, selling a ticket to an event. Let's take that as an example. So I start a community. I have all my other marketing channels, right, that are bringing and driving people down the funnel to make that actual purchase. But in my community, what I'm looking at is, what is my growth going to be in that community? Because I do think growth is important. You don't want to just have the same amount of people. And if you do want to have the same amount, let's just say I want to have my 100 raving fans. That's what I want. But you need to understand that there's going to be attrition. So you always need to be figuring out who's going to stay, who's going to go, so that if your metric is static, then you need to understand what the parameters are and set metrics for who the people that are going to be going and who are the people that you're going to bring in. I think the other thing in any size community, whether you're growing or staying static, is really understanding, the engagement level. If people aren't talking, with each other, if they're not sharing with each other, there's probably not a reason for that community to exist if you're the only one talking to them, because now go ahead.
How can you tell what's enough, like from a metric standpoint? How do you set metrics for they're talking to each other enough now?
Yeah, well, and I think it's going to evolve if you're just starting, right? Because you're going to probably instigate most of the conversation. Yeah. But as you grow, as you kind of set a benchmark for, hey, on an average week, here's how many people are talking with each other. Here's how many people shared a post. Here's how many comments those posts got. You kind of set the benchmark and then understand, hey, I don't want to stay at a static benchmark, right? I want to continue to grow this even more. And looking at that, the key, and this is what most communities don't do then, is now after I kind of have that benchmark set, after I've kind of set those initial goals that I want to try and hit with engagement, whether it be members, whether it be engagement, whether it be, engagement between other members. Now I want to go and say, okay, out of this group of my community, how much of my business is coming from this group compared to all the people that aren't in my community?
Mm-hmm.
And now you're comparing your community to your audience, right?
Right.
And you're saying, okay, so out of this group of 100 people that I have in my Facebook group, I'm getting 20% of my business, compared to the other 80% that's coming from all this other money I'm spending on marketing.
Yeah.
And so if you can start saying that a community member is a business value of you at 4 times an average audience member, that's where you start saying, I know a lot of this might be correlated metrics and not direct metrics,
sure.
but doesn't it show you that if you can double this, right, double the size of your community, that you could effectively maybe grow that percentage or grow your business by another 20%, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's like what I really look at doing, is saying, okay, what are the community members offering us? What value are they providing us? And then after a period of time, I can start measuring what they're doing, the results that they're getting, and saying, how does this compare to what everybody else is getting me through my other efforts?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the one metric I think that most people that run communities don't look at, is they just throw it all into one bucket and say, well, this is only getting me this is getting me this. They're not saying, no, there's greater value for what this community is doing, because if you haven't set up referral links to know that they're referring sales to you, right? If you haven't set up, things to say, here's what their purchasing power is compared to somebody who's not in that community, now all of a sudden you start seeing those things, and then you can make strategic tweaks to the community as far as numbers go, as far as the type of people that you want in there. I mean, when I started at HuffPost Live, I will tell you that my mandate was to get as many community members from the comment section to become on-air guests. Now, I started that when we pre-launched. I did it when we launched, and it took me almost 40 days after we launched, so it was about 2 months I had a very good relationship with a lot of community members. It took me 2 months to get one community member to agree to come on air. And I finally learned it was because the people that comment in typing, they know that they can hit the delete button. They know that they can, they can spell correct their stuff before the public sees it. When you're on air doing what we're doing here, now granted, if you're listening to it on the podcast, right, it's coming out all polished, or more polished than maybe what we're doing live. But live, you don't know. You don't know what's going to come out, right? You don't know what I'm going to say next. And so that is just the opportunity, I think, that most people didn't have. What I saw when I told my executives this, I said, listen, we've been working on this. I know everybody was thrilled. We were cheering in the newsroom, and everybody was really happy. It was a huge success, and we wanted the next one. And I'm like, I'm not going to wait another 2 months and spend all my time doing this. What if we just pivoted and understood that these people don't want to be on air, and look at a different group that wants to be on air? And all of a sudden, my time and energy and efforts went to recruiting our commenters to be on air guests. I still interacted with them and I still engaged with them, but no longer was that the important metric of how many commenters I could get. Now it was how many people could I reach out to in other ways that weren't commenters that I could help my producers with. And it was pretty amazing. I mean, our team was basically me. I worked with a couple other people that were like associate producers, but it was amazing to see how much our production teams, they did the bulk of the recruiting for guests. But when they needed somebody in the last minute, when they had a fallout in guests, what they could do is come to me, and I knew somebody in the community I could reach out to that could get camera ready, be on air, and knowledgeable about the topic they were talking about, generally within 15 minutes.
That's a powerful network. That's really cool.
And so that to me didn't happen when I started. It happened by me learning and understanding what was important, what metrics were there, and how I could use this community, right, to the benefit of the organization compared to what the organization was telling me was important to them.
That's awesome.
Different metrics. I was going to ask, what recommendations do you have for guiding community members towards becoming buyers? But that seems kind of silly now, based on what you've said. It's more you should be guiding them to be ambassadors for you, huh?
Well, and you might have different types of community members, right? Because my commenters were no less important at HuffPost Live than the people that were on air guest. They were just as important. It shifted how I interacted with them, right? I interacted with them in the comments, not asking them to buy what I was offering, which was to become an on-air guest. So I stopped wasting my time asking for that sale there. And I shifted it to people that weren't commenting that would want to come in and be on-air guest. And so that was a different type of community member. They may or may not have become part of the commenting community, but my job was always, I looked at this multifaceted, right? The perfect guest for me was somebody that could talk intelligently without promoting themselves or their business, because that's what our production staff wanted.
Sure.
I knew
journalistic in their
yeah. I could get somebody that was active on social media, so they would help share the segment when they were on it, and they would actually come in and comment. And the fourth thing that I think is most important, and I don't even think I brought this up yet, right? It's about how do you get more people in your community? You have them refer other people to become members of the community. So that was the perfect guest for me, right? It was the one who could be on air, that could share it, that could comment on it, and could refer more people to the community. Okay. And if I found those four, that was like a perfect community member for me. And so when you're looking at these community members, it's not saying don't ask for the sale, right? But remember, they're not there for you to ask them for their sale. Not all of them, at least. Some of them may be, some of them may not. But the ones that are buying might be your best referrals, just as some of the ones who aren't buying might be some of your best referral networks. And so it's all about like understanding in your mind. I never told anybody, right? Like while I was working with them, that they were this type of community member. It was always like an internal thing that we dealt with. Now I'm sharing those secrets so everybody knows. But so when you're talking about somebody, you might say, oh, this is my referral guy. This is my, my buying guy. This is my promoting guy. And now one of those people, and I should say Gail, because I don't want to make this, I'm trying to get better about my language and not being sexist, but it's like, so if this lady, right, if this woman is one that buys from you, but is also a good promoter, then make her in both of those types of profiles for your community. Make her get both of those messaging, but don't send the person who's in the non-buying one that's just in the the referral and the promoting one. Don't send them one that says buy from us, because you're going to turn them out, because what you're showing them right then and there is they know that you're not caring about them. You're not taking an interest in them. It's purely about what you want. And that's not what a community is about. A community is about what can we all get out of this together. If I'm not giving you something, you're certainly not going to get anything from me.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is, again, it goes back to drilling down deeper than other people are willing to do. I see that theme a lot with high performers and with people who are really engaged with excellence. They are willing to do more seemingly unscalable things, and it's not that they do a thing, it's that they do more of the thing better, deeper, further, faster, stronger, etc., than other people are willing to do with it. So the scalability of some of these activities, what has to change when a group goes from, like, for instance, right now our group is about 300 people. What can we do now versus when the group is 3,000 people? I don't anticipate it'll ever be 30,000. I want to cap it out at about 10 or 20,000. But it sounds ridiculous for me to say that right now, starting from where we are. But it's what are the things that change in that?
Well, I think
that growth process?
the important thing, right, is that you're probably driving most of that engagement currently. And
Generally, right
what
now.
you need to start looking at is who are the people, maybe it's just one person to start with, right? Like you put your training wheels on and learn with them, right? Like what's working, and have them tell them what you're doing, right? I mean, you don't need to give them all the back end details, but make them aware that, hey, you've really seen their efforts in here, and you've identified that they might be a real asset to what you're doing in this group. Would they want to be part of it? And if they are, take them in and kind of learn with them and give them some ideas, but don't tell them exactly what you want done. Just tell them, here's the overview of what I'm looking at doing. Would you be willing to help? And I think when you start having the other community members start to be able to do the work that you were doing at the beginning, that's how it becomes scalable. Because now you're not the one having to do all that work. You have that one person turns into 5, right? When you get to 500 or 1,000, that 5 people turns into 20 when you get to 5,000. When you get to 20,000, maybe you have 100. And so now it's like not this whole thing. And maybe that first 20, right, or that first person, maybe now is running that whole 100, that group of all 100. So you don't even have anything to do with it really, except for the overall strategy, right? And this person's running that group because they've elevated and they've grown as the group's gone, and you've given them more responsibilities. And so how do you scale? It's by how do you find the people that are most engaged in your community? And I call it like a vest and elevate, right? How do you get them vested in your community? And then how do you find where those trigger points are when they can make a decision? And I always say there's like 3 decisions a community member can make, right? They can leave, which does neither of you any good, because now you need to go back and find that one person again, go through the relationship building with them, get to a point, learning what they want, and move them along the process. So that doesn't help anybody. The other thing that they can do is just never tell you that anything is wrong and just continue doing exactly what they're doing, but their engagement starts to dip. They're not passionate about it anymore, and they don't want to do nearly as much work for you.
Yeah.
At the point you ask them what's going on, it's probably too late. So that really hurts you, right? And you lost the passion that was fueling the person to do what they were doing.
Yeah.
The other opportunity is we can identify that, have a conversation with them, and then elevate them up to that next level, right? So if maybe you were just socially sharing something and you've been really good at doing that for like the last 6 months, but all of a sudden, we have this new opportunity and we have this referral program going in, and, we could really use your work for this. Would you be interested? Now, all of a sudden, I've asked you to take a bigger role, right? This wasn't something that I just promoted in the group to everybody. This is me reaching out to you, asking if you want to be part of this, and I can elevate you up to that next level. So one of my clients actually called this a step process. So, they enter the journey, come in the community, go along, do a certain amount of thing. They get to a certain point, and then there's a decision that needs to be made. Do they want to continue on, or do they want to rise up to the next level? And then go along, rise up to the next level, and keep going across. But for me, it's just as simple as vest and elevate. If any of you have played like a fantasy game like Dungeons and Dragons, this is what the Dungeon Master does, right? He finds those opportunities in those places where you go, and then decides what the outcomes are going to be based upon what happens and what choices you make at that place. And a community is no different. That's, as a community builder, that's what we need to look at doing. And that's how we can start to identify how to scale, is by bringing enough people. I mean, it's no different really. As I'm talking and understanding what you guys do, I'm like sitting there going, this is just a reverse funnel, right? It's about bringing somebody in on the bottom level and then raising them up through the process, instead of, taking a whole bunch of people, putting them in and getting them down to the one level, so it's like, it really is a similar process. It takes a little bit more of a relationship building thing than it does, just the transactional thing. And you can make it very automated. Like, you can have messaging as long as it's specific to that type of community member. Just be sure that that person knows that that's what that is. I was in a group. Right. I was in a group with one of the nonprofits I work with, and I was in a very select group that was kind of like the social media council for this organization. And one of the people that was a member when I first belonged kept getting birthday messages from the email campaign, thanking her for that and wanting to know if she wanted to donate her birthday to the cause. And she's like, don't they know that this is what I do and this is who I am? Well, of course they do. But it was it was a large organization. So it was two different, marketing channels. One was the email company that was doing the email marketing. It was for a birthday segment. You get put in the system, people forget about you. This group of passionate supporters that really helped the organization on social media, they were the ones that wanted that hand-holding. They wanted the organization to know everything about them, when their birthday was, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they wanted to be asked to do, how they wanted to help out. And so getting an automated, message for their birthday was like the trigger that made them leave the organization. That's how powerful doing one wrong thing can be in a community once you build a healthy community up.
We've got a question that relates to that. The question is, do you advocate gamification for getting community members to step up and become more involved? I'm going to modify that question. What gamification do you advocate for making that happen?
Yeah, well, I think gamification, when done properly, can be very effective. It's a way of kind of elevating that person up to the next level, like we talked about early on about like giving somebody a title, right? That's a form of gamification, right? And we did at HuffPost, we did that on our commenting platform. It was a native commenting platform, but we had badges. And the badges started well before I took over. They didn't really hold any value to too many people, so we didn't really make any changes. But one of them was called a pundit badge. And if you were a political pundit, you got your comment elevated to the top of all the comments on that post. Not only that, but you could have your comment, you could use formatting. So you could have bold and italics and different fonts. You could also put links in your comment where no other commenter could put links in.
So there's a functional benefit.
So there's a functional benefit for you being a pundit. So when I took over, I said, I know our commenters love this and I don't want to take it away from them, but how did we decide who these people were? And nobody could answer that for me. So I went to my team of moderators and I said, I want you to rate. Here's our list of commenters. You know the ones that aren't on the list and you know the ones that are on the list. Here's the criteria for that type of commenter. Somebody who's very active, that you never need to worry about reading their comment and deleting it. We went from, I think we had 500 people, somewhere around there, to just over 100 by the time our moderators got done with that list.
Yeah.
And now we had a qualified way of determining who a pundit was that had that privilege. The good thing for us was they were producing a lot of comments each day. We just passed that right through. The only comments that ever got moderated for them were ones that other community members flagged, which rarely happened. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a pundit anymore.
Right.
And that was pure gamification, right? Like we gave them that badge, we gave them that functionality because of the actions that they were able to take. You know, it had, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but certainly it's, I don't want to overemphasize it. Don't add gamification just to have gamification. But if you can find a way that's going to provide value for the members that you have and help elevate them along that journey, then definitely add it in, but do it strategically and ask your community before you do anything, right? Get some of the valued members in your community to give you feedback. Think of how this would feel, right? If you were a community member and I reached out to you and said, Jeremy, here's what we're thinking about doing. What are your thoughts? What do you think the other community members would think about this?
Yeah.
Nobody knows about this other than us telling you. Internally, we might know about it, but nobody in the public knows about this.
Like a sneak peek plus.
I'm not only giving you a sneak peek, I'm actually valuing your opinion enough to help us make some last minute changes on whether we actually implement this or not and how the final product looks.
Yeah.
We did that at HuffPost with many tech changes that we went through. We had a couple dozen community members that we would ask and bring in. And so gamification, asking your community can be a great way to bring that in.
Now, but people don't get hung up on the fact that HuffPost owns their own tech platform. The kinds of things we're talking about here are not just applicable to tech. I can think of 6 different examples that we could do right now in our Facebook group, even though we don't own the technology for that Facebook group. I mean, we could just take that directly and just ask you all. Now I'm going to have to do it, aren't I? Okay, so, well, we will take that directly and just ask you all your opinion on things. But we can also, I can think of several different ways we can do fun little gifts. I can think of several different call outs that we can do, like a referral Thursday kind of thing or something like that for people who have distinguished themselves. So my brain's turning here, and use what you can from this. Don't expect everything to apply 100% to you. If it applies 30%, use it. It's worth it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, that's the important thing to remember. I'm very focused. I do this 100% of what I do, or what I did do, was all about community building, right? It wasn't about the sales. It wasn't about the marketing. It wasn't about all the other aspects that probably most people listening are involved with. So I know it can be overwhelming, and your point is spot on. It's finding that one thing, right, that we talked about that resonates with you, that you think you can implement into what you're doing with your existing business, and running with it in your own way. It's not about trying to do everything that I'm talking about and slapping it on, because whatever you try to do too much, and I'm sure you guys see this, it just gets overwhelming. You don't put enough focus or attention on any one thing, and nothing comes out working the way that you want it.
I may have done that once before.
Well, if you've only done it once, I'm about 150 times ahead of you.
Tim, I want to hear your reaction to a tactic, because we talked about referrals, and we have tried to use some messaging for getting people to refer or talk about our group and share the word of that, and it has come back in our faces kind of negatively.
Oh, I remember the thing with another podcast guest.
Right. And they have their own groups and that. So maybe I don't know how they're viewing it. Like, oh, we're competitors or something. I don't know.
I think we ended up all on the same page, and we all ended up happy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, but I'm curious: is there a way that we can word that referral request more gently, or I don't, maybe a little less in your face? I don't
on our guests.
For our guests or for group members who we think would be a good fit to go, and if we've kind of categorized them as that kind of person.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I mean, we kind of get into splitting hairs with words here, right? But sometimes words matter, and maybe if we just called them an affiliate, right? Or, instead of a referral, and I mean, it's just little things that we can play around with and look at the language on. I don't think, the overall approach needs to still be that basic premise that I always ask myself first before I ever do anything. It's like, what's in it for them? Right. And I mean, my wife and I are just launching a new business, and it's more of an interest thing, but we're trying to, get it going. And I tell her, well, okay, what are we going to, in some of our initial discussions, I'm like, okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we like beach vacation. I'm like, okay, but do we really want to make this just about beach vacations? Because that's going to very focus in on a certain group of people, or do we want to make it a little bit broader? And, and she's like, okay, well, yeah, I get it. Okay, we're going to go here and we're going to go there. And I'm like, okay, well, why are people going to come read this?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I thought we were just sharing what we were doing. And I'm like, well, we are, but we need to keep in mind why somebody's going to want to read this. Right. So like I was reminded, and this is going to be a post that I actually have up in a few days, but it's like, I learned this trick a long time ago for business traveling with one of my mentors that I had a long time ago, because we traveled a lot together on planes. Right. And whenever my wife and I travel, I always look for a middle seat that's open in the whole row. I get her a window seat and I get the aisle seat. Because what's the last seat that somebody picks? The middle seat. And if nobody picks that seat, then we got a whole row to ourselves. If they do pick it, have you ever heard a person in the middle seat say, do you mind taking the aisle? And so I take the middle seat and I sit there next to my wife, and we have our journey. But that's like a little trick that I've seen so many couples that, took the middle in the window, the middle in the aisle, the 2 aisle seats, I'm like, you could have a whole row to yourself, right? If you did, I mean, not all the time, but quite a few times. And I'm telling my wife, and she goes, you can't tell that secret. I'm like, why not?
The audience isn't going to be that big.
Airline lawyers are going to come after you.
Yeah, well, or how many flights are we going to be on? I don't want to get too big of a head, but I doubt everybody in the world's going to read that and go, oh my God, Tim McDonald's trick of booking the whole row, and now we never get a row to ourselves because everybody's doing that. but that's
you want to hear tricks like that. By the way, I want to make sure that we get your word out there.
Yeah, and that's the pivot of, can we talk about how great the airline was that we flew on? And were they great? Yes, we can. But why does anybody care about that? When we start talking about things that we did, that one little draw in, now all of a sudden people care. And so I know it was a long-winded thing, but this gets back to it's always in my mind, what's in it for them. And I think as you look at these tactics and these engagement strategies and some of the gamification, don't ever lose sight in, just because you think it's going to work this way doesn't mean that other people are going to react that way. And so always try and take yourself out of your thinking and put it into, how are other people going to react to this?
Right. And
you're not going to be right all the time.
Ask them.
How
they're going to react. You can often just find out how they're going to react by literally just going and finding out.
Talk about a good engagement strategy, right? Put a question like that up in your Facebook group and community and see what people think about it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So now if people want to go hear about your globetrotting adventures, then they can go to globetrotting.international, which is a very interesting web address. I've never seen a .international web address before. But
and usually when you post things on Facebook, it comes up with a hyperlink if it's a web address. So I always got to make sure I put the HTTP // there, because if I don't, people are like, what was that you just sent me? I couldn't figure out how to get there. And I'm like, no, that is the web address. It's just globetrotting.international. But
there's a ways to go yet on those top level domains.
Oh, yes. But it does open up a whole new opportunity. And I know we talked before we started recording. It was just, we were looking for things. And when you start looking at travel and everything, there's just so many that are taken. And all of a sudden I saw that one and I'm like, oh man, this is perfect for, I think, what we're talking about.
Of course.
So I can't say we've had great success because we literally just launched it last week. But,
it's brand new, right?
Yeah, but it's it's all about just starting something, creating something, and see where it leads, and that's what we're doing.
So, what are you doing now? What's your work these days?
Yeah, well, what I love doing the most is giving talks and workshops to organizations, associations, or just small groups of individuals that are interested in learning about how to use these communication tactics, right? Because really community building is all about using communication to build relationships to deliver results. That's what it's about. And if anybody's interested in that, I do 2-day ones, I do full day ones, I've done half-day ones. So I go in and first thing is I don't have a canned presentation. So I don't come in and give you exactly what I give to somebody else, because I want to understand what you're trying to achieve, what your members are going to want to learn about, and how I can effectively get there. Yeah. And my talks can be anything from the community building and communication side of things to really helping people understand what's important to them, how they can kind of live their life's purpose and tell that story in a very authentic way that other people start feeling them as a person instead of just seeing them as a product.
Right. Well, I like that. Okay. And I'm not trying to wrap things up right now, but I do want to connect that with the how should people get in touch with you if they want that.
Oh, yeah. No, the easiest thing is just email me, which is real easy. It's timamcdonald@gmail.com. You can call me. It's area code 312-970-0846. I still use the telephone. You don't have to text. I'll actually pick it up and talk to you. Or you can, probably the most active platform I'm on is Twitter, which is just @TAMcDonald. And I'm happy to connect on any social platform, but Twitter is the most open, which is why I like it, because we can listen in and communicate with just about anybody that's on that platform.
Nice.
Tim, I have one more question then. What about paywalls, paid communities, putting up a paywall there? When's that appropriate?
Yeah, I think it can always be appropriate. My suggestion would be, just from looking at past history, is if you are thinking about doing a paywall, start with a paywall. Do not build up a very vibrant, open, free community only to go back and get the members to pay.
Oh, that feels creepy.
I have seen it work, but very rarely.
What about a tiered, like a free community and a tiered paid community inside that?
Yeah, you can definitely have that. I think the biggest thing, though, is understand kind of what you're, I mean, if you're asking for payment, right, you better be delivering more than what the free community is getting.
Sure.
And sometimes the free community, because it's really fueled by the members, might become more vibrant and more of a place that people want to be. So
that would be a problem.
So you really need to understand, how am I going to differentiate them? How am I going to make it more valuable to be
without clamping down on the free community?
Exactly.
Stepping up your game in the paid part.
Right. So it's definitely doable. I just think if you want to go that route, do it from the onset. Don't try and switch it over after you get momentum going.
That makes sense.
Very cool. Well, I enjoyed this a lot. You have a question
that I thought Jason was going to get around to, and I really like it.
Okay.
About the turf that you build on. One of the things that concerns us, and we have a lot of friends who are concerned about this from time to time, is the Facebook rule changes when it comes to groups and all the other kinds of rule changes they do. I mean, they're literally under pressure from Congress to change all kinds of rules. And so it's not just their decisions, it's governmental decisions. How do you mitigate some of that as a group, founder, owner, whatever you want to call it? But how do you build as much as possible on your turf and still get people to come do it and it be a vibrant community? Because that's the thing. There's always a platform that you can use that, yes, you can own the entire thing, and no one's ever used it in the last 10 years. And so how do you find the balance there?
Yeah, I think, to me, it's really one of these things where you need to understand that if you're on Facebook, right, like Facebook constantly is making changes. Years ago, I mean, you didn't have nearly the amount of metrics that you currently have in a Facebook group. And who knows tomorrow if, we'll even be allowed to use Facebook groups without paying for them, I mean, so it's all one of these things about understanding if you build a true healthy community, it doesn't matter what platform you're going to be on, because if something happens there, you can message everybody, says, hey, we're going to be over here now because of this, and this reason. If I always say this, there are so many great platforms out there that give you so much more flexibility and control and communication, channels through these kind of affiliated communities that is just, think of, if you're in a Facebook group or if you're in 10 Facebook groups, right, and you see the same post come up from the same person in all 10 groups, how annoying that gets as a user, right? And so imagine an affiliated community where I post it one time, you only see it one time, even though you're members of all these affiliated communities, because you only have one news feed for all your communities. And there are platforms like that out there. And so, you always need to say, well, what's more important to me? Is it, do I want to go where the people are, or do I want to get people to where I am? And if you can start with that fundamental question and understand what the challenges and what the restrictions are going to be in both of those, you're going to be fine. But
now there's 45 more minutes of stuff to talk about that stuff.
But I mean, you literally can, right? You literally can start your own community. It might be a little bit more difficult than inviting all your Facebook friends to come join your group, but it's going to be more valuable in the long run, because if you're looking at this as a community as something that's not a transaction, it's a long-term relationship building engine.
Yeah.
Then it might be worth doing that.
Okay. Well, I think, boy, I would love to talk with you about some specific software and platforms that can happen on. And so maybe we'll stay, after we stop recording, we'll stay on a little bit, and maybe we can even build a PDF list for people to download or something like that.
Absolutely.
We'll see what we can do. Okay. Well, very cool. Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah. Wow.
You have changed my thinking today a little bit.
Wow.
The difference between an audience and a community. I was not making that distinction.
This is so funny. I had a Facebook memory pop up today, and I had a conversation when I was down in Grand Cayman last week for my birthday about what kind of speaker I am. And the first thing that people want to say is, oh, you're a motivational speaker. And I said, no. And they said, oh, you're an inspirational speaker. And I said, no. And they said, well, then what kind of speaker are you? And I say, I'm a transformational speaker. And they're like, what does that mean? And I go, I get people to think differently. If you're inspirational or motivational, you get them pumped up in the moment, and then they go back to their regular lives and they do exactly what they've been doing. Transformational gets you to change your thinking, which means when you get back, you want to change the way that you do something. And that's what I hopefully help get people to do.
Very cool. I'm a perspirational speaker. Our guest today has been Tim McDonald, community developer, founder, and the guy who helps people integrate, I guess, their work and life into something really cool. And so they can email you. We could zip back into the recording and find that. Go to, I was looking at globetrotting.international.
Yes.
Okay. But not .com, .international. You got to type all that out. Get a hold of you there.
And tell them your email address, Tim.
It's Tim A. So TIM, letter A, and then McDonald, McDonald @gmail.com.
And TA McDonald, or at TA McDonald on
Twitter,
which I went and did while we were. Very cool. Our guest next week will be Christopher Gaudreau, funnel architect, perhaps the funnel architect, Jeremy. I'm not sure. It's sort of a Highlander thing, I think. There can be only one, slicing the heads off other funnel designers out there. Until it's the only one left. Everybody who's watching, I hope you're recording your sales calls. If you're not recording your sales calls, start. Especially if it's legal to do. Okay, make sure it's legal to do in your state. But if it is legal, start doing that. Listen to your calls. We have a free webinar that's a pinned post in the Sales Call Overhaul group. Join us there. If you haven't joined the group yet, go to facebook.com/salescalloverhaul and message the page. Okay, and and the bot will get you in to figure out how to join the group. Okay, and if you got a recorded call that you're like, how could I do better on this thing, right? Go and message the page again, and you can upload it to us and submit it as an entry for our $1,100 Sales Call Overhaul contest.
We want to boost your close rate by 10%.
And we will. Mark Firth, who submitted the call, the previous one that we did, went back out there and saw 40% sales rate.
Yeah, he's getting 40% conversion right now. Yeah.
It's awesome what he was able to instantly go and do just by doing the easy work of listening and reading what we had to say and then remembering it on the call and implementing. So good job, Mark, on implementing. Yeah. And that's it for this week. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.